After 20 years at a top tech company in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, I walked into work expecting another normal day, only to be blindsided with a demotion to janitor. They thought they could humiliate me, erase my legacy, and throw me away like trash. But what they didn't know was I wasn't just cleaning up their mess, I was gathering evidence. And soon, they'd regret ever underestimating me. IronTech, a once thriving tech company located in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, had been Brandon's professional home for 2 decades. Brandon was barely keeping it together. Every part of his life was crumbling at the same time, and there was no escape. At IronTech, he had gone from a respected leader to an invisible janitor, forced to listen to people who used to look up to him mock his downfall. At home, his sister was spiraling deeper into addiction, his daughter was on the verge of expulsion, and his wife had turned into a ghost, vanishing at odd hours, barely speaking to him, hiding something big. He was drowning in betrayals, stress, and unanswered questions. But every time he tried to catch his breath, something else dragged him down deeper. And then came the breaking point. The office turns against him. Brandon had been with IronTech for 20 years, and now the same people he had once mentored barely acknowledged him. Lisa from accounting smirked every time she passed him. James strutted through the office like he owned the place, and the whispers never stopped. But the real gut punch, they weren't just ignoring him, they were setting him up. It started with small things. He would leave a supply closet organized, only to find it trashed the next morning, management blaming him. Files he had nothing to do with would suddenly go missing, and he'd be the first person questioned. Then, one afternoon, James stopped him near the elevators, wearing that smug grin Brandon used to coach him out of years ago. "Brandon, man," James chuckled, shaking his head. "You really should just quit. I mean, mopping floors? That's gotta be humiliating." Brandon kept his expression neutral. "I earn my paycheck, James. That's more than I can say for some people." James laughed. "See? That's your problem. You think hard work matters, but in the real world, it's about who you know, who's got your back, and, he shrugged, grinning. "Nobody's got yours." Brandon clenched his jaw, but said nothing. James leaned in. "Connors is watching you, Brandon. You should be careful." The warning sent a chill down his spine. Something wasn't right. Next, Brandon gripped his phone tightly before calling Dana. His jaw was clenched as it rang, knowing exactly how this conversation was going to go. She picked up on the third ring, her voice overly sweet, as if she had been expecting him. "Bran, how's my favorite brother?" she said cheerfully, as if nothing had happened. "Cut the crap, Dana. Where's my money?" he said, his voice cold and unwavering. She sighed dramatically. "Brandon, come on, it's not a big deal. I was gonna pay you back." "Not a deal? You drained my account." $800, Dana. What the hell were you thinking?" Silence. Then, a huff. "I was thinking I needed help, and you wouldn't give it to me." Her voice rose in irritation. "So yeah, I took what should have been mine anyway." Brandon pinched the bridge of his nose, trying to suppress the anger boiling in his chest. "Yours? Since when was my money yours?" "Oh, give me a break, Brandon. You act like you're the only one struggling. You're whining about your job, your wife, your kid, but guess what? You're not the only one drowning." He let out a bitter laugh. "You think this is the same? Dana, I worked for everything I had. I didn't steal. I didn't manipulate the people who care about me. And I didn't have a choice." She snapped back. "You think I wanted to go down this road? Do you think I like feeling like this every damn day? You think I wake up and say, oh, I'd love to be addicted to this crap? No, Brandon. I needed you, but you were too busy feeling sorry for yourself to see it." Brandon's breath hitched. He wanted to feel sympathy. He really did, but the anger, the exhaustion, was winning. "No, Dana, you didn't need me. You needed another bailout. You didn't come to me for help. You came to me for money. What difference does it make? The difference is, if you actually wanted help, I'd be there. But all you ever do is take and take and take." He exhaled sharply. "And I can't do it anymore." Her voice softened. "Brandon, please." "No," he interrupted, his voice firm. "You need to figure this out, Dana, because I can't be the one keeping you afloat anymore." A long silence. Then, she whispered, "So that's it? You're just done with me?" Brandon closed his eyes, forcing the lump in his throat down. "No, Dana, but I can't help you if you don't want to help yourself. I hope you never need me the way I needed you," she said before hanging up. Brandon stared at his phone, the weight of the conversation crushing him. He wanted to believe she would change. He really did, but deep down, he knew better. Brandon sat at the dining table, staring at the clock. Mia, his daughter, was late, again. When the door finally creaked open, he saw her try to sneak past him, head down, hoping to avoid a conversation. "Sit," he said firmly. She groaned, rolling her eyes, but plopped into the chair opposite him. Where were you? Out, she muttered, kicking at the leg of the table. Brandon's fist clenched. Try again, she huffed. At a friend's house. Which friend? Mia hesitated. It doesn't matter. It does when I get calls from the school telling me you skipped class. Again, his voice was sharp now. Tell me the truth, Mia. She crossed her arms, leaning back in her chair. Why? So you can lecture me? Act like you care when all you do is work and complain about how bad your life is? Brandon's chest tightened. Don't turn this on me. You've been skipping school, lying, sneaking out. I need to know what's going on with you. She let out a sharp laugh, cold and bitter. What's going on with me? How about what's going on with you? You're miserable, Dad. You hate your job, you hate your life, and you just exist. Brandon exhaled slowly. That's not fair. No? Then what are you doing? She snapped. You don't talk to Mom. You barely talk to me. You're so obsessed with how people screwed you over at work, but you don't even see what's happening here. Brandon's jaw clenched. I'm trying, Mia. No, you're surviving, and I don't want to end up like that. Her voice cracked slightly, but she covered it up with frustration. He studied her, really looked at her. Beneath the anger, the defiance, was hurt, disappointment, maybe even fear. Brandon sighed. I know I've been distant, but I'm still your father, and you're not going down this road, Mia. You're better than that. Her eyes flickered, but she didn't answer. I get it, he continued, his voice softer. You feel lost, so do I. But skipping school, sneaking around, it's not going to fix anything. She bit her lip, her anger dimming slightly. Then what will? Brandon leaned forward. We figure it out together. For a moment, she looked at him, uncertainty in her eyes. Then she nodded, just slightly. It wasn't a full breakthrough, but it was a start. As if life hadn't crushed him enough, Olivia was still disappearing. One night, she came home past midnight. He was already awake, waiting. She smelled like expensive perfume and guilt. Where were you? She froze. Out, she muttered. With who? She hesitated. Brandon's chest tightened. You're lying. She finally met his gaze. Maybe I am. That was all he needed to hear. Something inside him snapped. Without a word, he grabbed his jacket and walked out. The next day, Brandon confronted Olivia directly. This time, he wasn't letting her shrug it off. You've been sneaking around for months, he said, his voice level but sharp, lying to my face, disappearing for hours. You think I haven't noticed? Olivia crossed her arms, leaning against the kitchen counter. Brandon, you don't get it. No. He shot back, stepping closer. I do get it. You've checked out of this marriage, and now you're hiding something. Who is he? She scoffed. You think this is about another man? Brandon's pulse hammered in his ears. Then what is it about? A bitter smile tugged at her lips. It's about you. His stomach dropped. Me? Yes, you. Her voice rose, frustration bubbling over. You're so obsessed with your downfall, with playing the victim, that you haven't even noticed how much you've changed. You used to be driven, passionate. Now you walk around like a ghost, consumed by bitterness. Brandon clenched his fists. That's rich coming from you, the woman who disappears without a trace, who comes home smelling like a different life. What am I supposed to think, Olivia? She exhaled, rubbing her temples. I didn't cheat on you, Brandon, but I did think about leaving. His throat tightened. So why haven't you? She looked away. Because part of me still believes the man I married is in there somewhere, but I can't keep waiting forever. The weight of her words pressed down on him. He had been so consumed with Iron Tech, Dana, Mia, everything falling apart, that he hadn't even considered how much of it had bled into his marriage. He swallowed hard. I'm not the only one keeping secrets, Olivia. I know you've been meeting with someone. Her head snapped up. What? You think I wouldn't check? His voice was cold now. You met with a lawyer last week. Olivia's expression faltered. Brandon, tell me the truth. Were you planning to leave and take everything? She was silent, and that was all the answer he needed. Brandon nodded slowly. Got it. Without another word, he walked out of the room, his mind spinning. She wasn't the only one preparing for the next move. Brandon had reached his limit. He had spent years building Iron Tech, only to be thrown aside like garbage. But he knew every dirty secret about the company, and now it was time to use that knowledge against them. Late at night, when the building was empty, Brandon would roam the halls, subtly collecting information. He had access to areas that no one paid attention to anymore. The server rooms, old storage closet filled with outdated files, confidential records left unsecured. One evening, he found something explosive, a hidden audit report that exposed major financial fraud. Connors and his inner circle had been cooking the books, hiding mismanaged funds, and shifting money into personal offshore accounts. Brandon smirked. This was it. This was the weapon. He anonymously leaked key documents to a well-known investigative journalist. He forwarded copies to the company's board members, along with timestamps proving Connors had orchestrated it all. Then he sat back and watched the chaos unfold. The scandal hit like an earthquake. Within days, investors pulled their funding. The media was ruthless, painting Connors as a fraud and a corporate thief. Employees panicked, distancing themselves from the sinking ship. Then, the FBI raided the office, and Connors was arrested. James and Lisa were implicated, their names plastered all over the leaked files. Iron Tech was finished. Brandon stood outside the building on the day the doors were locked for good, watching it all collapse. He had done it. He had taken them down. A week after Iron Tech's downfall, Dana called him again. This time, she wasn't asking for money. She was sobbing. Brandon hesitated before answering. He had heard her cry before, but this time, something was different. He took a deep breath and picked up the phone. Dana, his voice was firm, cautious. Bran, her voice cracked, barely above a whisper. I messed up so bad. He clenched his jaw. What happened? I don't know where else to go. She let out a shuddering breath. I lost everything, Bran. The apartment, my car. I owe people, bad people, and I can't do this anymore. Brandon closed his eyes, his grip tightening on the phone. Dana, I told you. I know what you told me. She interrupted, her voice raw with emotion. That's why I didn't call you sooner. I know I screwed up. I know I stole from you. I know I've taken advantage of you for years, and I hate myself for it. He exhaled slowly, his anger mixing with exhaustion. So what do you want? Another loan? Another chance to disappear the second things get tough? No. She sobbed. I want to get clean, for real this time, but I need help. I need someone to believe I can do it, because I don't even believe it myself anymore. Brandon's chest ached. He had seen her spiral so many times before, had heard so many broken promises, but something about the way she spoke, the way her voice wavered with true desperation, made him pause. Dana, if I help you, there's no turning back. You go to rehab, you stick with it. No excuses, no running. She sniffled. I will. I swear. Just please, don't give up on me. Brandon sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. All right, I'll help you, but this is the last time. Thank you, Bran. Thank you. I swear, I won't let you down. He wanted to believe her. He really did. But only time would tell if this was just another empty promise, or if she was truly ready to change. Dana's struggles in rehab. Dana checked herself into rehab a week later. Brandon drove her there himself, watching as she hesitated at the entrance. You sure about this? He asked. She wiped her face with her sleeve. But I don't have a choice, do I? No, you do, he said. But if you leave, I won't be here next time. She swallowed hard and nodded before stepping inside. For the first few weeks, the updates were minimal. Then, the calls started. Some days, she was motivated, determined to stay sober. Other days, she begged Brandon to let her leave. Bran, I can't do this. It's too hard. The withdrawals, I feel like I'm dying. You're not dying, Dana. You're healing. Stay the course. She cursed him, told him she hated him, but each time, she stayed. Then, one night, a call came in. It was her counselor. Dana had a rough night. She almost relapsed, but she pulled through. She's fighting. Brandon felt something he hadn't in years, hope. 3 months later, when he picked her up, she looked different, healthier, stronger. I'm proud of you, he told her. She smiled, for real this time. Thanks for not giving up on me. For the first time, Brandon believed she had a real chance. Brandon knew that rebuilding trust with Mia wouldn't be easy. He had let her down too many times, and she had built a wall around herself, one that wouldn't crumble overnight. One evening, as they sat in silence at the dinner table, Mia finally spoke. Why now? Why are you trying so hard all of a sudden? Her voice was cautious, skeptical. Brandon put down his fork and met her gaze. Because I should have been trying harder all along, she scoffed. That doesn't just erase everything. I know it doesn't, he admitted. I can't undo the past, but I can be here now, if you let me. Mia exhaled sharply, stirring the food on her plate. You're saying that like it's that simple, like you can just decide to be a dad again and everything's fine. Brandon leaned forward. I don't expect things to be fine, Mia. I just want a chance to prove I'm not the man you thought I was becoming. She bit her lip, looking conflicted. I don't know if I can trust that. Then I'll keep showing up until you do. For a moment, she studied him, as if trying to determine whether he was lying. He held her gaze, unwavering. Finally, she sighed. Okay, it wasn't a full reconciliation, but it was a start. Brandon didn't just try to be present, he actively made an effort. He picked her up from school, helped her with homework, even learned about the music she liked, despite how foreign it all sounded to him. One evening, he found her sitting on the porch, scrolling through her phone. Can I join you? Mia shrugged. It's a free country. Brandon sat down beside her, resting his arms on his knees. I know I wasn't there when you needed me the most, but I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere. She hesitated before speaking. You mean that? Yeah, I do. Mia gave him a sideways glance, then nodded. Good. For the first time in years, it felt like they were finally on the path toward something better. Brandon sat across from Olivia in their dimly lit kitchen, the silence stretching between them like an unbridgeable canyon. The divorce papers lay between them, a stark reminder that their marriage was officially over. She traced the edge of the papers with her fingers, her expression unreadable. I guess this is it, huh? Brandon exhaled sharply. Yeah. She looked up at him, her eyes searching his face. I never wanted it to end like this. Neither did I. His voice was quieter than he expected. For years, they had been partners. Not perfect, but partners. Now, they were nothing more than a pair of strangers, bound only by the wreckage they had created. I did love you, you know, Olivia admitted, a small, sad smile forming on her lips. I wasn't always this person. Brandon nodded slowly, and I wasn't always this person either. She let out a soft, humorless laugh. Maybe that's the problem. We became people we didn't recognize. He thought about it, thought about how they had both drifted, how his own bitterness had fed her distance, how her secrecy had hardened his heart. Maybe. She swallowed hard, looking down at the table. Are you ever going to forgive me? Brandon studied her, realizing that for the first time in months, he didn't feel angry, just tired. Tired of the fighting, tired of the resentment, tired of holding on to something that had already fallen apart. I already have, he admitted. Her breath hitched, and she blinked quickly, as if trying to keep the tears at bay. Then I hope you find something better, Brandon. I hope you find yourself again. He stood up, grabbing the papers and signing them without hesitation. You too. And with that, he walked out, leaving the past behind him for good. Brandon walked away from the wreckage of his old life, a different man. He had lost everything, but in the process, he had gained something even more valuable, freedom. For the first time in years, he could breathe, and this time, no one was going to take that from him. Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, had once felt like a prison, the place where his life had crumbled. Now, as he stood by the shoreline, watching the waves roll in, it felt like something else entirely, a place to start over. Brandon and Mia had found a rhythm, an understanding that had once seemed impossible. She still had her moments, times when she would retreat into silence or lash out in frustration, but she no longer shut him out completely. One evening, as they sat on the couch watching a movie, she turned to him suddenly. So, are you going to tell me what's next for you? Brandon smirked. I'm figuring it out. She raised an eyebrow. You're unemployed. You should probably figure faster. He chuckled. Thanks for the reminder. Mia hesitated before adding, I think you'll be fine. You kind of took down an entire company. That's got to count for something, right? Brandon shook his head, laughing. Not sure how well corporate sabotage looks on a resume, but I'll figure something out. She studied him for a moment before saying, I think you're different now, in a good way. Brandon felt something loosen in his chest, something that had been tied up in regret for too long. So are you. For the first time, he could see a future where their relationship wasn't just about making up for lost time, it was about building something new. Dana's second chance. Dana was 6 months sober. Brandon had never thought he'd be able to say that and believe it. She still struggled, of course. There were bad days, moments where she was tempted to fall back into old patterns, but this time, she had support, real support, and she wasn't running anymore. One afternoon, she met him for coffee, stirring her drink absently before speaking. I got a job. Brandon's eyebrows lifted. Really? She nodded. It's nothing fancy, just a receptionist gig, but it's steady, and I show up sober. That's a first. He smiled. I'm proud of you. She exhaled, leaning back in her chair. I think I'm finally proud of myself too. There were no guarantees in life. Brandon knew that better than anyone. But as he looked around at the people who had once felt like burdens, he realized something. They weren't burdens. They were just people trying to find their way, just like him. For the first time in years, he wasn't chasing revenge. He wasn't consumed by anger or betrayal. He was living, and it felt damn good.